Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni might be two of the most consistently disrespected people in the entire NFL.
So my takeaway on Jalen Hurts is I don't think he's a franchise quarterback.
I've said it before and I'll say it again. I don't think Jalen Hurts is going to lead Philadelphia or any NFL organization to a Super Bowl.
Bro, that was clown behavior. He looked like Nick Sirianni looked like an absolute clown.
The second Jalen Hurts was drafted to Philadelphia, he was instantly labeled as a huge mistake, a baffling pick for the Birds. For Nick Sirianni, he was immediately mocked, being called a doofus and a clown upon his arrival. And the disrespect did not stop there, as throughout their entire tenures with the Eagles, Hurts and Sirianni have always had constant doubt and criticism thrown their way. Yet, that never stopped them, and this past year, they finally proved everybody wrong. This is the incredible story of how the NFL's most disrespected duo became Super Bowl champions. I'd say the Philadelphia Eagles entered the 2020 NFL Draft with fairly high expectations. I mean, just the season prior, they had survived a year where they were completely decimated by injuries, and still yet they somehow made the playoffs on the back of franchise quarterback Carson Wentz and a group of practice squad guys that came out of nowhere. Now, unfortunately, things ended in heartbreak as Wentz got hurt once again and the Birds lost to the Seahawks in the wild card round. But even so, many Eagles fans still believe that if Wentz and the team could stay healthy and you put the right guys around him, then the Birds could go back to the Super Bowl and win it once again. And the draft is obviously a huge part of that, which is why everybody was completely shocked and blindsided when the Birds decided to use the 53rd overall pick in the second round to select none other than Oklahoma quarterback Jalen Hurts.
What? Jalen Hurts? I can't understand this. But I don't understand. It doesn't make sense.
I mean, at the time, this pick made absolutely no sense. Like, why take a quarterback so high when you already supposedly had your franchise guy in Carson Wentz you just paid big money the offseason prior? Like, again, it didn't make any sense. At least so we thought, as fast forward to the middle of the 2020 season, and Wentz looked absolutely awful. I mean, he had turned into a complete turnover machine, throwing 15 interceptions and fumbling 3 times in only 12 starts, while also taking about 1 million sacks. And the Eagles' offense was just absolutely abysmal and couldn't get anything going all year. And eventually, it all culminated in Wentz being benched in the middle of a Week 13 contest with the Green Bay Packers, meaning that Jalen Hurts would finally get his opportunity to see some action, and in all honesty, he made the most of it. As Hurts gave some life to the Eagles' dead offense, instantly hitting fellow rookie Jalen Reagor on a deep shot, and later hitting Greg Ward deep for the first touchdown pass of his career. And overall, Hurts finished that game just 5 of 12 for 109 yards, a touchdown, and a pick. But again, he gave the offense a clear spark and showed some promising signs. So much so to the point where Doug Peterson named Hurts the starter for the rest of the season, and in his first game, he did something that nobody expected. Also, a huge shout out to the sponsor of today's video, Turtle Beach. Turtle Beach is a company that sells headsets, controllers, and all sorts of gaming accessories across multiple platforms, and I've actually used one of their Xbox headsets for years now, and I've always been really happy with it, so I was absolutely thrilled when they reached out and offered to send me their wireless Stealth 700 headset, and I gotta say, this thing right here is pretty awesome. Now, the first thing I did was ran a game with our Eagles on Madden, and I immediately noticed how amazing the sound quality is, and the headset's 3D spatial audio feature immerses you right into whatever game you're playing. I mean, take a game like Fortnite, for example, which, to be clear, I absolutely suck at, but at least the 3D audio of the headset gives me an edge by helping me to know where the enemies are coming from. And that's not all, because on top of that, this headset is super comfortable, and with a whopping 80 hours of battery life, that means you can play for hours by yourself or with friends with no issue. Plus, the Stealth 700 headset has a crazy crossplay transmitting feature, meaning you can switch between different consoles with the click of a button, or you can also connect it to your phone as well. I mean, again, guys, I love this headset, so go to turtlebeach.com and use code PhillyFans for 10% off your entire order. Again, that's 10% off at turtlebeach.com with promo code PhillyFans, and afterwards, please let them know that I sent you, because that really helps support the channel. And again, thank you to Turtle Beach for sponsoring today's video. Jalen Hurts took the field for the first time as an NFL starter, staring down a difficult challenge, with the number 1 seeded New Orleans Saints in town as the opponent, who also happen to have the best defense in pro football. That didn't stop Hurts though, as he took the challenge head on and looked nothing like a rookie in his first NFL start, as he wound up finishing 17 for 30 on his throws with a touchdown pass to Alshon Jeffrey and no interceptions, while he also added 18 carries for 106 yards on the ground. and his impact went beyond just the stat sheet, as Hurts had clearly injected new life into an offense that was dead in the water up until that point in the season, and in the end, Hurts and the Eagles had knocked off the Saints and their number one defense 24-21 in what was a phenomenal debut for the rookie. And from there, Hurts started the rest of the season, and while the Eagles went 0-3 and missed the playoffs, he still did have some impressive moments, including passing for over 300 yards against the Cardinals and Cowboys, and even throwing 3 touchdowns in Arizona. But even so, the critics were still very loud, as Hurts still had a long way to go to become a permanent quality starting quarterback. And even with Carson Wentz clearly on his way out the door, there was absolutely no guarantee that Hurts was going to be the future in Philadelphia. 2021 marked a new beginning for the Philadelphia Eagles, as that offseason, not only did they trade Carson Wentz to the Indianapolis Colts, but they also fired their Super Bowl winning head coach Doug Peterson in what was a complete reset for the franchise. And when the dust had settled, the Eagles had their new head coach, and it was none other than Nick Sirianni. Now, Sirianni obviously had a connection to former Eagles OC Frank Reich, as he was the offensive coordinator for Reich's Colts for the previous 3 seasons, but it was really Sirianni's interviews that landed him the job, as he reportedly blew the team away with his energy, football mind, leadership ability, and vision for the Birds moving forward. But while his job interview may have been impressive, his introductory press conference with the Eagles was pretty much the exact opposite.
Next thing that's very important to me is that we build a smart football team. The first part of that, the first part of being smart is knowing what to do. We're gonna have systems in place that are easier to learn. All right, complicated to the defense or offense that they're going against or the special teams group they're going against, but easy for us to learn. Less thinking equals talent take over, but we need to have systems in place, and we will have systems in place to do so.
He looked like a deer in headlights. I don't know what the hell he was talking about. He was mumbling his words.
Speaking, you know what I mean? Head coaching is a lot of speaking. Yeah. That involves a lot of it. I think if you're listening to what Eagles fans are probably saying right now, you can hear them. They're going, this guy is our guy.
I mean, there's no question about it. Sirianni's first press conference in Philly didn't exactly go great, and it only caused the critics to grow even louder. I mean, this is really the guy who the Eagles decided was the best choice to be their next head coach. Luckily, Sirianni got off to a better start with the team itself, even owning the fact that he absolutely bombed his opening presser in a moment that Eagles legend Brandon Graham later revealed helped win him over.
He won me over when he first got here because it was cool because that press conference he had that he, did all the stuff, said all the wrong things where y'all got on him. I just felt like he came into here and gave us his honest answer on how he felt about it. He was pissed about it, and I love that. That's when he won me over, man, just coming in, being real.
By the time the regular season had rolled around, Sirianni had won over the entire team, getting them to buy into a culture that preached the core values of connection, competition, accountability, football IQ, and fundamentals. But the doubters were still abundant. Meanwhile, for Jalen Hurts, he had officially taken over as the team's full-time starter, and oh boy, were there a lot of doubters about that, most notably with NFL analyst Chris Sims leaving Hurts off of his list of the top 40 quarterbacks going into that season. And overall, following a 4-11-1 year, the expectations for the Eagles were pretty darn low, with them expected to win around 5, 6, or 7 games. So, with all the doubt and disrespect being thrown their way, Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni entered the 2021 season with something to prove. And a new era of Eagles football had officially begun. And things started out with a bang, as the Eagles traveled down to Atlanta and decimated the Falcons by a score of 32-6. And for Jalen Hurts, he looked great, throwing for almost 300 yards along with 3 touchdowns and no interceptions, while Sirianni's Eagles as a whole looked connected, energetic, and tough, all things that seemed to be missing the year prior. However, things didn't stay so positive, as 6 weeks later, the Eagles sat at just 2-5 and the season was on the verge of being lost. But Nick Sirianni wasn't giving up hope, as he was sure that this team was close to breaking through. And that's a message that he conveyed to both the team and also the media in what is now known as the iconic flower speech.
This is what I said to the team today, Howard, is that I said, right, that the results aren't there right now, but what's going on here is that there's growth under the soil. I put a picture of a flower up, right, and it's coming through the ground, and the roots are growing out. And the only way the roots grow out every single day, and they grow stronger and they grow better, is if that we all water We all fertilize. We all do our part.
Now, naturally, this speech, much like Sirianni's introductory presser, is something that he caught a lot of heat for.
It's like maybe the first time ever that I heard something which I find that's just so ridiculous that it's made me speechless.
We are in the manure stage. We smell like poop. We play like poop. We are not very good. We're eventually, like Tim McGraw says, we're going to see our corn pop up in rows. Okay?
Luckily for Sirianni, though, the only people who didn't seem to scoff at this message were the players, as they bought in, and this speech ultimately wound up being the turning point, not just for this season, but of the Sirianni-Hurts era in general. Now, it was apparently also at this time where Sirianni actually gave up play calling duties and decided to focus even more on the other aspects of being head coach. And starting in their next game versus the Lions, Sirianni and the Eagles finally started to see the seeds sprout up a bit, as they demolished Detroit 44-6, and from there, they went on to win 7 of their last 9 games, largely because of a new commitment to running the football, which led them to having the #1 rushing attack in the entire league. Meanwhile, for Jalen Hurts, his first season as a full-time starter actually wound up being pretty impressive, as he clearly had improved from his rookie season throwing the football while also cutting down on turnovers, and overall, he had become a pretty solid starting QB. And when the season was all said and done, he and Sirianni had led the Eagles back to the postseason against all odds. However, in their matchup with the reigning champion Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the GOAT Tom Brady, they really struggled, as the defense couldn't stop Brady while Hurts and the Birds' offense could barely get anything going. And 2 costly interceptions by Jalen Hurts certainly didn't help. And in the end, the Birds lost 31-15 with all their points pretty much coming in garbage time. Overall, it was a very promising first season of the Hurts and Sirianni era, but there were still plenty of questions, and many people still believe that Jalen Hurts just simply didn't have the ability to be the long-term solution for the Eagles at quarterback. The Philadelphia Eagles entered the 2022 season with a lot more hype than the year prior, as the draft day blockbuster trade for A.J. Brown, along with some other exciting additions, had fans thinking that this could be a special year. However, there were still questions, with the main one being, could the Birds actually win with Jalen Hurts? Could he be the franchise quarterback, or is he simply not good enough? Well, let me tell you, the popular opinion at that time was that he couldn't. I mean, people thought the playoff loss to the Bucs proved it, and they said he couldn't read a defense, he couldn't throw deep, he couldn't be a pocket passer, but Hurts statistically proved all those wrong with what was his true breakout year in 2022, as he and the Eagles rocketed out of the gates to a franchise record 8-0 start, and Hurts looked like an absolute superstar, turning in impressive performance after impressive performance, including a historic 3-touchdown showing versus the Vikings on Monday Night Football in what was his true breakout game. And that wasn't it, as Hurts also had masterful performances against teams like the Commanders, Steelers, and Titans, just to name a few. And when the season was all said and done, the Eagles found themselves atop the NFC as the #1 seed with a franchise record of 14-3, and Hurts was also firmly in the race for MVP, which he likely would have won if not for a late season injury. Meanwhile, Nick Sirianni had finished 5th in Coach of the Year voting, and his Eagles were about as connected, tough, and focused as they could have possibly been. I mean, the culture he had built in just 2 seasons in Philadelphia was incredible, and now he and Hurts were about to be put to the test once again in the NFL playoffs. And this time, the duo was ready, as they stormed through the playoffs, blowing out the New York Giants in the divisional round and then destroying the 49ers in the NFC Championship. And sure, Jalen didn't put up crazy numbers, but he did exactly what he needed to do for the Eagles to win each game. Meanwhile, Sirianni had the team 100% prepared and bought in, while he also brought the energy on the sideline. And just like that, Hurts, Sirianni, and the Eagles were off to Super Bowl 57 to take on Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs. And in that game, Hurts had one of the greatest performances by a quarterback in Super Bowl history, putting up 304 yards passing, better than 70% completion, a touchdown through the air, and then 3 more on the ground to go along with 70 rushing yards, which was a Super Bowl record for a quarterback at the time. And that's not the only record he set that night. However, the one blemish on Hurts' performance was a costly one, being a fumble that was returned for a touchdown, and while he did more than enough to compensate for that, the defense didn't hold up their end of the bargain, and in the end, Hurts, Sirianni, and the Eagles lost in a heartbreaking 38-35 defeat. The season was a major success, and Hurts and Sirianni had proved a lot of people wrong, but in the end, they came up just short. And while the Eagles themselves and fans were extremely hopeful for redemption in the following season, what actually happened had Hurts and Sirianni's critics talking louder than ever. 2023 marked a clear low point of the Hurts and Sirianni era in Philadelphia, as the Eagles entered the season with sky-high expectations of returning to the Super Bowl and winning it, but not only did they come up short, but they also endured one of the worst late-season collapses in the history of the NFL. I mean, sure, I guess it wasn't all bad. They did start the season 10-1 and had some really impressive wins over the Chiefs and Bills, one of which, that being the Bills game, where Jalen Hurts just turned into an absolute superhero, as with the team down 10 in the second half, he put the Birds on his back and led an impressive comeback, in which he put up 5 total touchdowns, 3 of which came through the air, and then in overtime, Jalen Hurts came up clutch, leading a drive down the field that ultimately ended up with him running into the end zone for the game-winning score. Unfortunately, though, it was all downhill from there, with the Birds losing 6 of their last 7 games, including an embarrassing blowout loss to the Buccaneers in the wildcard round, in which Hurts and the offense couldn't get really anything going. Now, there were a lot of reasons for the collapse. I mean, even when the Eagles were winning games, there were still clearly big problems on both sides of the ball. And I would argue the main issue was just poor scheming and play calling by the new coordinators, and I could get into all that, but the guys who easily took the most heat were none other than Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni, as Hurts was ripped for regressing from the previous year, with his turnovers going up at an alarming rate, as he went from throwing just 6 interceptions in 2022 to 15 interceptions in 2023, which was 3rd most in the league, while his 20 total turnovers were 4th. Plus, later in the season and after it, reports actually started to come out questioning Hurts' leadership, which was a surprise considering that was an area that he has shined his entire football career. But these new reports criticized Hurts' calm, stoic demeanor and called for him to be more vocal and outspoken. Meanwhile, for Nick Sirianni, the heat he was taking was honestly a lot worse. As the second things started to go bad, people were immediately calling for Sirianni to be fired, with speculation that he lost the locker room floating around, while he was also clowned for his sideline antics and trash talking. And he was also heavily criticized for playing a huge part in the Eagles' lackluster offense, given that reports were suggesting that it was his scheme and he was the main guy in charge. And mind you, this was an offense with incredibly basic route concepts and essentially no motion, no routes across the middle of the field, and no answers against the blitz. So, of course, defenses eventually caught on.
The answers that they provided to Jalen Hurts were not good enough. Wink Martindale blitzed Jalen Hurts in the Giants game. They had no answers. Todd Bowles blitzed 59% of the time last night. They had no answers. They don't take advantage of the middle of the field. So whatever they're going to do, they must focus on fixing the offensive problems first.
There's no question about it. Nick Sirianni did not do a good enough job in 2023, plain and simple. Now, were the coordinators at fault too? Yes. I mean, that defense was horribly coached, and Brian Johnson as a play caller was not good at all, but it was clear that Sirianni's influence in that offense was massive, and there were major issues with it. So, in my opinion, the criticism was definitely warranted at the time, and Hurts did deserve some as well. However, the sheer magnitude of it was just absolutely insane. I mean, it's crazy how quick Hurts and Sirianni went from being loved in Philadelphia to being criticized ruthlessly in just 1 year. And I think this was especially true with Sirianni, as the man had popcorn literally thrown on him after the playoff loss to the Bucs, and nearly everybody in the city wanted him fired. And they weren't very quiet about it either. Plus, reports also came out later that the relationship between Hurts and Sirianni had apparently grown tense, and that only made the criticism louder for both of them. But even with all that, Sirianni was getting another chance, making 2024 an absolutely crucial year for him, along with Hurts and the rest of the Eagles in general. Philadelphia is known for many things, but one of them happens to be a fictional boxer by the name of Rocky Balboa. I mean, the guy's not even a real person, but he's got a freaking statue at the art museum, so that's how you know he's a city icon. And of course, if you've seen the Rocky movies, you know his defining trait is his heart, as despite the fact that the odds are always stacked against him, he's always the underdog, and often nobody believes in him, he always manages to shock everybody and do the impossible, whether that's going the distance or winning the fight. Well, for Hurts and Sirianni, they had already gone the distance after being doubted, so now it was time for them to win it. But once again, like Rocky, not very many people believed in them following the disappointment of the 2023 collapse. And even with the excitement of adding Saquon Barkley and other guys along with the new coordinators, a disappointing 2-2 start in 2024 had people doubting them more than ever, as despite some injuries, a lot of the same issues from 2023 were still there, and that included Jalen Hurts continuing to turn the ball over at a high rate, and Nick Sirianni seemingly continuing to keep his hand in the offense while also making some questionable decisions. But luckily for Hurts and Sirianni, the Birds' bye week fell at the absolute perfect time, as not only did it give them time to get healthy, but it also allowed them a chance to make some much needed changes, one of which was to lean much more heavily on the run game led by superstar running back Saquon Barkley and the Birds' elite offensive line. A change which was suggested by some of the offensive linemen, that being Lane Johnson, Jordan Mailata, and Landon Dickerson, as they reportedly came into Sirianni's offense during the bye week to pitch this idea, and to the head coach's credit, he listened. And then on top of that, the bye week was also when something apparently clicked for Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni, as following all the reports of a strained relationship between the QB and head coach, which by the way, I think were overblown, they apparently came together during the bye and had some great conversations, which prompted Hurts to even make these comments about Sirianni ahead of their next game.
We're the true leaders of the team, and I'm happy and fortunate that we were able to come together in harmony and have the same goal in mind and trying to get this thing right. I got a ton of confidence in him, a ton of confidence in what he brings and everything he's been able to accomplish, and just continue to press on that. Everybody goes through different moments. Everybody experiences adversity, but we've experienced different levels of adversity together, and we're excited for what's to come.
After all those reports in the offseason, it was certainly very notable to hear Hurts give an endorsement of his head coach like that. And I mean, it was clear something had changed for the Eagles during that bye week, and much like this moment from Rocky II, it wound up being the turning point of the Eagles season.
Win. Win.
What are we waiting for? Take this!
Coming out of the bye week, the Philadelphia Eagles completely took off as they quickly began blowing teams out, and they went on to win 10 straight games and 12 of their final 13, which gave them a final record of 14-3 and was good for the number 2 seed in the NFC. And the Eagles' success was largely due to their new commitment to running the football, which allowed them to finish the season with the number 2 ranked rush offense in the NFL, while Saquon Barkley had perhaps the greatest single season for a running back in NFL history, putting up over 2,000 rush yards in the regular season and eventually going on to break the all-time rushing yards record for a season, postseason included. Plus, the Eagles' defense also hit a new level after the bye week as they quickly became a dominant force and finished the season as the best defense in all of football. However, Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni deserve a ton of credit for the turnaround as well. For starters, Hurts significantly cut down on his turnovers, and by that, I mean he pretty much stopped turning the ball over altogether, only throwing 1 interception and losing 0 fumbles after the bye week. And yes, Hurts' numbers through the air weren't very flashy, but that's because he really wasn't asked to do very much passing the ball, considering that the Eagles' new offensive identity was obviously in the run game, and oftentimes in the fourth quarter, the Eagles were blowing teams out, so there was no need for Hurts to throw the ball, and he didn't do it very often. I mean, for reference, NFL MVP Josh Allen threw for about 800 more yards than Hurts did in 2024, however, he took 122 more attempts to do it. And in the games and situations where the Eagles needed Hurts to step up and make plays, he did just that. And even in the run game, Hurts deserves credit, not just for making plays on the ground by himself, but also for becoming a master at the line of scrimmage and consistently getting the Eagles into the right run looks. Meanwhile, Nick Sirianni also deserves a lot of credit, not just for making the necessary adjustments during the bye week, including the switch to running the ball more, but also for just keeping this football team together and leading them through the trials and tribulations of a long season. I mean, it was clear the entire year that this Eagles team was both super connected and super focused on the task at hand. And that's in large part because of Nick Sirianni being able to create a culture and atmosphere like that, stemming from those core values that he established here back in 2021. Well, he also just continued to lead, and he got the team to buy in throughout the entire season. And it's made even more impressive by the fact that Sirianni did all this while facing extreme criticism, with perhaps the apex of it coming after he was seen yelling and jawing with Eagles fans towards the end of the Birds' win over the Browns coming out of the bye week.
Bro, that was clown behavior. He looked like Nick Sirianni looked like an absolute clown. They have every right to boo you. And you need to take that because that's part of your job as a head coach.
Yeah, safe to say, Sirianni was getting a ton of heat for this. And that's not all, as Sirianni and Hurts were criticized really all season, despite the fact that the Eagles just couldn't seem to lose. I mean, Hurts was constantly ripped by box score watchers for the lackluster passing numbers, while there was speculation that Nick Sirianni could still lose his job if the Eagles lost early in the playoffs. But Hurts and Sirianni blocked out the noise, and before they knew it, it was playoff time once again. And just like all season, there was more adversity and criticism. As in the wildcard round versus the Packers, Jalen Hurts was returning for the first time from a concussion that basically caused him to miss an entire month. And while the Eagles won the game pretty handily and advanced to the divisional round, people were very critical of Hurts' performance and the passing attack as a whole. And the noise only got louder the next week, as once again, Hurts didn't put up big numbers in the passing game, and people just chose to ignore the fact that not only were there multiple big drops and offensive miscues that, if executed properly, would have made Hurts' stat line look a whole lot better, but he was also dealing with a knee injury that he suffered during the game, and he was playing in a freaking blizzard for crying out loud. And he and the Eagles still won the game, beating the Rams in a nail-biter to go to the NFC Championship. And that's the game where Hurts really started to shut the doubters up, as he put up nearly 250 passing yards and 4 total touchdowns in order to a dominant Eagles win over the Commanders by a score of 55-23.
That's what the f***ing do! That's what the f***ing do! That's what the f*** I'm talking about right there! That's what I'm talking about right there, baby!
Just like that, Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni were headed to their second Super Bowl. The duo who everybody doubted and laughed at when they first got here, and then again after the collapse in 2023, and even during the season in 2024 when the Eagles were winning games, Hurts and Sirianni were disrespected. And once again, they proved everybody wrong and made it to the big game. And just like in Rocky 2, they were set for a rematch with the guys they lost to last time, as once again, they would be taking on Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid, and the Kansas City Chiefs. And this time, things were a little different, as the Birds' defense came to play, and they really shut down Mahomes and the Chiefs' offense. But the Chiefs were also able to stop Saquon Barkley and the Eagles' vaunted rushing attack. However, just like last time, Jalen Hurts balled out, as with the running game limited, he stepped up and put up great numbers in the Super Bowl once again, making play after play both with his arm and his legs. He broke his own record for the most rush yards by a quarterback in a Super Bowl with 72, and he wasn't half bad through the air either, putting up 221 yards and 2 touchdowns on a 77% completion percentage, in a performance that would eventually win him Super Bowl MVP. And for Nick Sirianni, this game was the culmination of all the hard work he's put into building up this team over the past 4 years. Sure, he may not be out on the field or the one calling the plays, but he is nothing short of a fantastic leader, an incredible motivator, and an elite culture builder. I mean, there's a reason why that team was as connected as it was all season. There's a reason why so many players went to bat for Sirianni when things weren't going good. There's a reason why this Eagles team remained so focused and locked in throughout the year. And it's because of that culture of togetherness, accountability, and competitiveness that Sirianni has built since he arrived in Philadelphia. And this Super Bowl was where it all paid off. And in particular, there is one moment from this game that was just the ultimate slap in the face to anybody that was still trying to doubt and disrespect Hurts or Sirianni, and that play is none other than the dagger.
Just call it. Just call it.
We're going to run some clock, or maybe throw the dagger.
I love when they doubt you. They can't with you. You're that man. They can't with you, dog. I know.
This play was just so perfect. I mean, from Nick Sirianni telling Kellen Moore to just call it after all the chatter surrounding his offense and play calling, to Jalen Hurts, the guy who everybody said couldn't throw deep, unleashing a beautiful deep pass to Devontae Smith that couldn't have been thrown any better to put the nail in the coffin and seal the Eagles a Super Bowl victory and revenge against the Chiefs. Not to mention the call, giving the play its incredible name. And when the game was over, Jalen Hurts, Nick Sirianni, and the Philadelphia Eagles had done it. Just like Rocky 2, they had won, they were Super Bowl champions, and nobody could take it away from them. In the end, Jalen Hurts proved that he was not in fact a draft mistake, and instead, he is an elite NFL quarterback, a player who wins at the highest level and who you can always count on in the big moments. And for Nick Sirianni, he proved that he's not a clown after all. And in fact, he's one of the best coaches, leaders, motivators, and culture builders in the entire NFL. From doubted and disrespected to Super Bowl champions. What a story it was for Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni. And they're not done, because the Eagles' Super Bowl window is still wide open, and they're going to be looking to do it all again next year. And the full schedule for the 2025 season actually just came out, so if you want to watch my breakdown on that and my prediction, then you can check this video out right here. And also, let me know in the comments if this kind of video is something you like, because I know it's a little bit different. And also, make sure you guys subscribe if you did enjoy, and also like the video, because it really does help me out a ton. And now, with all that being said, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.